Chapter 1. The Woman Sitting Next to Me. I walked into that meeting believing facts would protect me. Instead, she cried, they believed her, and my career disappeared in 8 minutes. I was suspended, erased, and told to stay quiet while the woman sitting next to me walked away untouched. My name is Elena Brooks, and this is the story of how silence almost destroyed me until the truth learned how to speak. I am 41 years old, and most days I am known for being steady. That is how people describe me at work. Steady hands, steady judgment, steady voice in rooms where decisions can cost millions of dollars. I am a compliance manager at North River Financial Services in Chicago, and for the past 5 years, my job has been to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. No shortcuts, no gray areas. No surprises that could put the company at risk. At home, steady looks different. It looks like waking up before 6 to make coffee while my husband Michael scans construction plans at the kitchen counter. It looks like reminding our daughter Lily to finish her college applications before soccer practice. 16 years old and already exhausted by the pressure to be exceptional. Sometimes I wonder when that started for her. Sometimes I know exactly when it started for me. My life is not glamorous, but it is balanced, or at least it was. Work demanded precision and patience. Home demanded presence and emotional energy. I had learned how to move between the two without dropping anything important. That was something I was proud of, even if I never said it out loud. Rachel Whitman sat at the desk next to mine. She joined our department in early 2022, transferred from another branch with strong technical credentials and a recommendation that described her as bright but anxious. I noticed her on her first day because she kept smoothing the sleeves of her blouse like she was trying to erase wrinkles that were not there. She smiled quickly, apologized often, and asked questions in a way that suggested she was afraid of asking the wrong ones. At 39, she was not young, but she carried herself like someone who still believed one mistake could erase everything she had worked for. In our world, that belief was not entirely wrong. By the time the 2024 compliance overhaul began, Rachel and I were assigned to the same core project team. It was the largest internal review North River had undertaken in nearly a decade, prompted by new federal guidelines and a growing appetite from regulators to look closely at firms like ours. Long hours were expected, late nights were guaranteed. Rachel sat to my right. That detail matters because proximity creates familiarity before trust has time to catch up. At first, she leaned on me for clarification, then for reassurance, then for review. She would slide her chair closer, laptop angled toward me, and say she was almost done but needed a second set of eyes. Her voice always carried a tremor at the end, as if the request cost her something. I told myself I was mentoring her. That was how I framed it. I had been the anxious one once. I remembered what it felt like to believe every error would be remembered forever. Helping her felt natural, almost automatic. She started staying late. So did I. Our floor emptied out around 7 most nights, leaving only the hum of the lights and the cleaning crew moving quietly in the distance. Rachel would bring tea from the break room and set it on my desk without asking. I would review her sections while she watched my face for signs of disappointment. "You always catch things I miss," she said one night, smiling with relief when I handed her laptop back. "It's just pattern recognition," I replied. "You get there." She nodded quickly, like she needed to believe that. At home, Michael asked why I was coming back later than usual. I told him it was temporary. Lily barely looked up from her laptop when I kissed the top of her head and reminded her to sleep. The house adjusted to my absence the way it always did, quietly. As the deadline approached, the pressure shifted from abstract to personal. Senior leadership wanted updates. Legal wanted assurances. Every number had to match. Every footnote had to align with the source data. Rachel began sending me drafts late at night, sometimes after midnight. I would see the notification glow on my phone while brushing my teeth, and a familiar sense of responsibility would settle in my chest. I told myself it was easier to look now than to deal with corrections later. One night in early March, an email came through at 2:17 in the morning. The subject line was short, almost final. The attachment was labeled Clean Draft. I opened it at my kitchen table, the house dark and quiet around me. The work was good, better than usual. Clean formatting, solid analysis, very few issues. That should have made me happy. Instead, it made me pause. There was a technical assumption in one section that didn't align with the framework we had discussed earlier that week. It was subtle, the kind of thing that would pass unnoticed unless you had lived with the data as long as I had. I typed a short response, asking where the input came from and suggesting a minor adjustment. The reply came 20 minutes later. Sorry, I'll fix it. Long night, brain fried. I remembered staring at the screen for a moment longer than necessary. Something about the exchange felt incomplete, like a door closing softly instead of clicking shut. But exhaustion has a way of dulling intuition. I closed my laptop and went to bed. The following weeks blurred together. Meetings, revisions, status calls where Rachel stayed quiet and let me speak. I didn't resent that. I was used to being the one who translated complexity into confidence. When the internal review phase officially began, I was named the primary compiler. That meant my name would appear on the final submission, even though the work represented dozens of hands and hundreds of hours. It wasn't a promotion, but it was a responsibility that carried weight. Rachel congratulated me with a tight hug in the hallway. "You deserve it. I would never have survived this without you." I smiled, uncomfortable with the praise, but accepting it anyway. On the last night before submission, I stayed later than planned. The building was nearly empty. Outside, Chicago wind pressed against the windows, carrying the muted sounds of traffic far below. I reviewed the final document line by line, checking references, confirming calculations, reading sections I had already read too many times. Everything matched, everything balanced. I submitted the report just before 11, sent a brief confirmation to the team, and shut down my computer. As I gathered my things, I glanced once more at the empty desk to my right. Rachel had left hours earlier, saying she had a headache. I rode the elevator down alone, listening to the soft music piped in through hidden speakers. In the lobby, the security guard nodded at me with tired familiarity. I stepped outside into the cold, my breath visible in the air. Walking to my car, I felt the quiet satisfaction that comes from finishing something difficult without compromise. This was what competence felt like, not celebration, just relief. I didn't know then that the report I had just submitted would soon be read in a very different light. I didn't know that the woman who sat next to me would soon sit across from me telling a story that didn't include the truth. That night, I drove home believing I had done my job. I believed I had protected the company, my team, and myself. I believed this project was over. I was wrong. Chapter 2. When Tears Decide the Story. The first email arrived 2 mornings later, flagged urgent by Human Resources and copied to senior leadership. It asked me to attend a meeting that afternoon in a conference room on the 12th floor. No agenda, no explanation, just a time, a location, and the quiet implication that something had gone wrong. I read it twice before forwarding it to my personal inbox, a habit I had picked up years ago when I learned that important things had a way of disappearing. Then I sat very still at my desk, hands folded, listening to the familiar sounds of the office move around me. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, laughter drifting from the break room, the normal rhythm of a place that did not yet know it was about to turn on me. Rachel was not at her desk. I told myself that meant nothing. She often worked from a different floor during high-pressure weeks. Still, the empty chair beside me felt louder than usual. At home the night before, Lily had asked if I would be able to come to her next soccer game. I told her yes, confident and distracted, already planning my schedule around the next phase of the project. That confidence felt misplaced now, like a suit that suddenly no longer fit. By the time I walked into the conference room that afternoon, I had rehearsed half a dozen explanations in my head. None of them prepared me for the reality waiting inside. Karen Holtz from HR sat at the far end of the table, posture upright, expression neutral. David Klein stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the city below. Rachel was already seated, shoulders hunched, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was crying. Not quietly, not discreetly. Her face was red, tears streaking down her cheeks, breath coming in shallow gasps like she was fighting to stay upright. The sight of her like that hit me harder than any accusation could have. Karen gestured for me to sit. I did. David did not look at me. Karen began by explaining that there had been discrepancies found in the compliance report I submitted. Language careful, passive, designed to sound procedural rather than personal. She said they needed to understand how the errors occurred and who was responsible. Rachel spoke before I could. Her voice shook as she explained that she had relied on the files I sent her, that she trusted my guidance, that she had been afraid to question anything because she was still proving herself. She said she had assumed I knew what I was doing. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. I tried to respond calmly. I clarified that the report was collaborative, that the sections in question originated from her analysis, that I had reviewed them but not authored the underlying assumptions. My words seemed to float in the room without landing anywhere. Rachel cried harder. She apologized repeatedly, saying she never meant for this to happen, that she felt overwhelmed, that she was scared of losing her job. Each sentence wrapped in visible distress, each tear reinforcing the narrative that she was fragile and therefore innocent. Karen finally turned from the window. His expression was tight, disappointed in a way that suggested the conclusion had already been drawn. He asked why I had not escalated concerns earlier, why I had signed off on the report if I had doubts, why the errors appeared under my name. I answered each question as directly as I could. I explained the review process, I explained the timeline, I explained that my role was oversight, not origination. Karen noted, Rachel sobbed. David watched me with a look that felt like judgment disguised as concern. At one point, I stopped speaking because it became clear that nothing I said was changing the temperature in the room. Silence filled the space where my explanations should have mattered. In that silence, my restraint seemed to read as guilt. Karen announced that the company would be initiating a formal internal investigation. During that time, I would be placed on administrative leave effective immediately. 8 weeks, subject to extension. My system access would be suspended. Rachel would be reassigned temporarily to another team for her well-being. I stared at Karen, waiting for something to soften, a reassurance, a clarification, something that acknowledged the imbalance I was watching unfold in real time. Nothing came. The meeting ended without resolution. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just the quiet efficiency of a decision already made. As we stood to leave, Rachel avoided looking at me. Her tears had stopped. Her face was blotchy but composed, like a switch had been flipped. When our eyes met briefly in the hallway, there was no fear there, only distance. I walked back to my desk under the weight of eyes I could feel but could not identify. Someone from IT was already waiting. He spoke kindly, explained the process, and asked me to log out. When the screen went dark, it felt final in a way I had not anticipated. I packed my bag slowly. Photos of Lily, a notebook filled with reminders and half-finished lists, a coffee mug someone had given me years ago that said, "Steady wins." I left it behind. In the elevator, my reflection looked older. Not tired, stripped. Outside, the wind cut sharper than it had the night before. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, unsure where to go next. Work was done. Home felt too close. As I drove away from North River Financial Services, I realized that something more than a project had been taken from me. My name had been quietly separated from my integrity, and the space between the two felt impossibly wide. For the first time in my career, I did not know how to explain what had just happened. I only knew that when I walked out of that building, I was no longer seen as the steady one. Chapter 3. The Cost of Staying Silent. The days that followed blurred into a strange, weightless routine. Without the morning rush to downtown Chicago, time stretched in unfamiliar ways. I woke up early out of habit, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the city wake up without me. Michael left for his construction site with a quiet kiss on my cheek. He did not ask questions he already knew would not have answers. On the dining table, our finances lay exposed in neat piles. Tuition brochures, saving statements, a handwritten note I had made months earlier estimating Lily's college costs. The missing bonus, just under $18,000, was not catastrophic, but its absence echoed loudly. It was the difference between comfort and calculation. No one blamed me. That was almost worse. Lily tried to pretend nothing had changed. She talked about her essays, about which schools her friends were applying to, about the upcoming season. But every so often she paused and looked at me with an expression too careful for her age. One afternoon, as I sat with my laptop open and a legal pad beside me, she hovered in the doorway. "Mom, everything's going to be okay, right?" I looked up and smiled because that was what mothers did. "Yes," I said, "it is." She nodded, accepting the answer without truly believing it, and went back to her room. Alone again, I stared at the screen without seeing it. The silence pressed differently now. It was not restful. It was accusatory. I replayed the meeting in my head. Rachel's tears, David's disappointment, Karen's notes. The moment my system access vanished with a click. Over and over, my mind circled the same question. How did this happen? At first, I tried not to think about Rachel. I told myself it was unproductive, even petty. But memory has a way of surfacing what you try hardest to bury. The late-night emails, the drafts labeled final that were anything but, the way she flinched when asked direct questions, then relaxed once someone else spoke for her. The moment in the hallway after the meeting when her fear had disappeared too quickly. I opened my personal inbox and searched her name. There were dozens of messages. Hundreds, if I was honest. I read them slowly, not looking for proof, just trying to understand the pattern I had missed. Timestamps jumped out first. Emails sent well after midnight. Files revised at hours no one else was working. Still, I knew instinct was not enough. In my world, suspicion without structure was useless. That was when I thought of Monica Reyes. She was an internal auditor, methodical and sharp, someone who spoke carefully and listened even more so. Months earlier, during a routine check-in, she had asked me a vague question about oversight boundaries. I remembered brushing it off, assuming she was just being thorough. I hesitated before reaching out. Pride lingered stubbornly, but pride did not pay legal fees or protect reputations. I sent a short message asking if she had time to talk. She replied within minutes. We met at a quiet cafe near the river, far enough from North River Financial Services that it felt safe. Monica arrived with a folder tucked under her arm and an expression that suggested she had been expecting this. She did not offer sympathy, she offered coffee. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this," she said, after we sat down, "but I'm not surprised." That caught my attention. She told me, carefully, that she had once found herself in a similar position, not formally accused, but uncomfortably close, a project where responsibility blurred just enough that blame could slide. Rachel had been on that team too. I pulled back in time, Monica said, documented everything, asked for reassignment. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. She met my eyes. Because at the time, there was nothing concrete, and because people like Rachel do not push until they know they can. The words settled heavily between us. Monica explains that while my access was suspended, audit requests could still be submitted through formal channels. Everything had to be clean. Everything had to be procedural. This has to be about data, not emotion, she said. We started with the basics: access logs, edit histories, email routing. Each request was filed properly, tied to the ongoing investigation. No shortcuts, no favors. Back home, my laptop became a different kind of workspace. I sat at the same table where Lily did her homework, scrolling through spreadsheets while she worked on essays. Our worlds overlapped in quiet, unspoken ways. Some nights, Michael would sit across from me, reviewing his own plans, the glow from our screens reflecting the same tired determination. He never asked when this would end, he just asked what I needed. As the data came in, patterns emerged. Metadata showed revisions made after hours from Rachel's account, not once or twice, but consistently. Edits that aligned precisely with the discrepancies flagged in the report. Then came the emails, files forwarded from Rachel's inbox to mine minutes after the edits, creating a trail that suggested my involvement. A clever move, subtle enough to evade casual review, damning enough to stand up in a rushed meeting. I remember the exact moment it clicked. I was sitting at the table, a printed log spread in front of me, when Lily walked by on her way to the fridge. "Are you working again?" she asked. "Just reading," I said. She leaned over my shoulder, eyes scanning lines she didn't understand. "You always catch things," she said casually, "like when I mess up my math." I looked at the page again, at the timestamps, at the deliberate spacing. This was not panic. This was planning. The realization did not bring anger. It brought clarity, the kind that sharpens instead of burns. I called Monica that night. "It's systematic," I said. "She's been doing this for months." "I know," she replied. "Now we make sure they see it too." We agreed on next steps. Everything documented, everything submitted through legal. No confrontation, no warnings. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. I no longer felt like a victim waiting to be rescued. I felt like someone standing at the edge of a long process, aware of its cost and committed anyway. Silence had taken something from me, but it had also given me time. And time, when used carefully, could change everything that came next. Chapter 4. When Facts Learn to Speak. The work began quietly, the way serious things often do. There were no dramatic messages or confrontations, no sudden demands for explanations, just a series of scheduled calls, formal emails, and shared documents that grew heavier with meaning each day. Monica Reyes handled the audit requests with the precision I had always admired. Thomas Enwin joined us soon after, introduced as in-house legal counsel assigned to oversee the integrity of the investigation. He was calm in a way that felt deliberate, not cold, not warm, just exact. "We let the facts do the talking," he said during our first call. "No commentary, no interpretation beyond what the data supports." I appreciated that more than I expected. We met in small increments, a conference line here, a secure file share there. Everything documented, everything timestamped. I stayed careful about my language, even in notes to myself. I had learned how easily words could be turned. Rachel was not contacted, not by me, not by Monica, not by Thomas. That silence felt strategic, almost surgical. It removed the opportunity for rehearsed emotion. As the timeline took shape, my role became strangely passive. I answered questions, I clarified processes. I did not plead or explain beyond what was necessary. That restraint was harder than it looked. When the notice for the second internal hearing arrived, it felt heavier than the first. This time there was an agenda. This time legal was listed as a participant. This time the room would not be shaped by tears. I arrived early, sitting at the long table with a glass of water untouched in front of me. Karen Holt entered next, her expression unreadable, but her posture different, more cautious. David Klein followed, nodding at me without the disappointment that had marked our last meeting. Rachel arrived last. She looked composed, almost rehearsed, hair neat, makeup carefully done. She smiled tightly as she took her seat across from me. For a moment, I wondered if she believed this would play out the same way. Thomas began by outlining the scope of the review. His voice was even, neutral, unhurried. He spoke about access controls, revision histories, and internal routing protocols. The language was technical, but the implication was clear. This was no longer about feelings. Monica walked the group through the data. Screens displayed logs and charts, dates and times aligned in a way that felt almost elegant. Revisions clustered after business hours, access patterns repeated with consistency, emails forwarded with precise timing. I watched Rachel as the information appeared. At first, she nodded, calm, attentive. Then her fingers tightened around her pen. When Thomas spoke again, he addressed the central question. The evidence indicates that Elena Brooks received the files in their edited state. It does not support the conclusion that she initiated or altered the underlying assumptions. Karen leaned back in her chair. She did not write anything. Rachel interrupted. "I do not understand what you are implying," she said. Her voice was steady, but the pitch was higher than before. "I followed the process I was given." Thomas did not respond immediately. He clicked to the next slide. "This log shows your account accessing the document at 11:43 p.m. This email shows the forwarded version sent to Elena Brooks at 11:51 p.m. Rachel frowned. "I work late." So do many people. The issue is not the hour, it is the sequence. For the first time, Rachel hesitated before speaking. "I was tired. I may be misremembering." Karen glanced at her sharply. The room grew very still. David cleared his throat. "Rachel," he said, "can you explain why the version sent to Elena included changes not discussed in team meetings?" Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. She tried again. "I thought they were approved." "By whom?" Karen asked. Silence stretched. I felt a strange detachment settle over me. This was not vindication, it was exposure. The difference mattered. Rachel shifted in her chair. Her composure cracked just enough to reveal strain. "I was under pressure," she said. "I did not think it would matter." Monica spoke then, her voice calm but firm. "It matters because it created a false trail, one that implicated someone else." Rachel looked at me for the first time since the meeting began. Her expression was not apologetic. It was calculating, as if searching for a new angle that no longer existed. Karen did not speak for a long moment. When she did, her voice was measured. "We need time to review this further. All of it." David nodded. "Agreed." Thomas closed his folder. "We will reconvene after a full assessment," he said. No one argued. As the meeting adjourned, Rachel stood abruptly, gathering her things with unsteady hands. She did not look at me again. Karen lingered behind, her gaze following Rachel out the door. 48 hours, that is what we need," she said quietly. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. Outside the conference room, the hallway felt brighter than it had any right to be. The world had not shifted dramatically, but something fundamental had loosened. The balance was no longer fixed. For the first time since I walked out of that building weeks ago, I felt the weight begin to move. Not gone, just moving. And sometimes That's enough to change everything. Chapter 5. She saved herself once. The decision arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered with the same calm tone the company used for quarterly updates and holiday schedules. Karen Holt asked me to come in at 10. No urgency in her voice, no softness either, just a time, a room, and the sense that this would be the last meeting about my name. I sat across from her and David Klein while Thomas Nagin joined by video. The table was clear, no folders stacked like before, no screens glowing with charts. That absence told me more than any speech could. Karen spoke first. She said the investigation had concluded. She said the findings showed I had not initiated or altered the data that caused the discrepancies. She said my actions were consistent with my role and responsibilities. Then she said the words I had not realized I had been holding my breath for. My record would be fully cleared. System access restored. Bonus reinstated in full. Personnel file amended to reflect no fault. David looked at me then, really looked at me, and nodded once. Not an apology, not quite respect, but acknowledgement. Rachel Whitman was not in the room. Karen explained that she had been reassigned permanently and issued a formal disciplinary action. It would remain on her record for the duration of her employment. There would be no announcement, no spectacle, just limits, quiet ones, effective ones. When the meeting ended, Karen asked if I wanted to return to my previous team. I surprised myself by saying no. I requested a transfer to a different department, a clean start, new structure, same standards. Karen did not question it. She simply nodded and said she would make it happen. As I walked out of the building that afternoon, the city felt unchanged. The same traffic, the same wind pushing between buildings, the same people hurrying past with their own concerns. I did not feel triumphant. I felt finished. At home, Michael listened while I told him everything. He did not interrupt. When I was done, he exhaled slowly and wrapped his arms around me. "I knew you would come back clean," he said. That night, Lily burst through the front door waving an envelope in the air. "I got in," she said, breathless. "My first choice." I laughed then, a real laugh, the kind that shakes loose something you did not realize you were holding. We ordered takeout and ate together at the table that had once been covered in spreadsheets in worry. The papers were gone. The space felt lighter. A few days later, I saw Rachel in the hallway. She looks different, not smaller, just quieter. She did not cry. She did not speak. She nodded once and kept walking. That was all. I never told her what I knew she had done. I never needed to. The system she tried to bend had remembered everything, the timestamps, the trails, the patterns, the things she assumed no one would ever line up. I learned something through all of this that I had not expected. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is patience, sometimes it is restraint, and sometimes it is the space you need to let the truth arrange itself properly. There are victories that look loud from the outside, and there are ones that simply restore what should never have been taken. Mine did the latter. If you have ever stayed quiet to protect yourself or wondered if the truth would ever be enough, I would like to know. Do you believe that staying steady matters even when no one seems to be listening? And do you think the truth eventually finds its place, even if it takes longer than we want? If this story stayed with you, stay here. There are more to tell.